Hello and welcome. This is Ehsan, and today I want to briefly compare the syntax and definition of a computer programming language, Python, with a natural language, English. Let's get started. First of all, let's have a better grasp of computer programming languages. A programming language is a formal language comprising a set of instructions that produce various kinds of output. Besides, as you can see on your screen, computer programming languages allow us to give instructions to a computer in a language the computer understands. Just as many human-based languages exist, there are an array of computer programming languages that programmers can use to communicate with a computer. In neuropsychology, linguistics, and the philosophy of language, a natural language or ordinary language is any language that has evolved naturally in humans through use and repetition without conscious planning or premeditation. Natural languages can take different forms, such as speech or signing. They are distinguished from constructed and formal languages, such as those used to program computers. As mentioned, our task today is to make a comparison between the syntax of a programming language, Python, and a natural language, English. Of course, as we have just read, the first distinction surfaced in the description of a natural language. Natural languages that we use on a daily basis, say English, are far more flexible compared to formal languages we employ in language programming. Also, keep in mind these points. Natural languages are used for communication between people, and programming languages enable humans to interact with machines. Programming languages need a high degree of expertise, completeness, and precision because computers cannot think outside these statements. The programming language syntax is not based on a natural language grammar. Therefore, the main difference in the grammar of a programming language and a natural language is that natural language may be informal in speaking, but not in written communication, while the grammar of a programming language follows specific syntax. To dive deeper into this comparison, let's brush up on some basic English syntactic rules first. Syntax, set of rules we call the grammar of a language. In fact, the structure of sentences is called syntax. One of the principal concerns of syntax is the order of words. Also, sentences are not random collections of words, but strings of words which are organized according to certain rules. Now, let's watch a short video.
9 fundamental types of English words: nouns, pronouns, articles, verbs, adjectives, adverbs, prepositions, conjunctions, and interjections. These are all called parts of speech. There are all sorts of subcategories too, like singular versus plural nouns and superlative versus comparative adverbs, but we're not going to get into that. Knowing a word's type is definitely useful, but unfortunately there are a lot of words that have multiple meanings, like rose and leaves, which can be used as nouns or verbs. A digital dictionary alone isn't enough to resolve this ambiguity, so computers also need to know some grammar. For this, phrase structure rules were developed which encapsulate the grammar of a language. For example, in English there's a rule that says a sentence can be comprised of a noun phrase followed by a verb phrase. Noun phrases can be an article like the, followed by a noun, or they can be an adjective followed by a noun. And you can make rules like this for an entire language. Then, using these rules, it's fairly easy to construct what's called a parse tree, which not only tags every word with a likely part of speech, but also reveals how the sentence is constructed. We now know, for example, that the noun focus of this sentence is the Mongols, and we know it's about them doing the action of rising from something, in this case, leaves.
Now let's talk about the syntax of a computer language. The syntax of a computer language is the set of rules that defines the combinations of symbols that are considered to be correctly structured statements or expressions in that language. Text-based computer languages like Python are based on sequences of characters, and if these documents or sentences are syntactically invalid, they are said to have a syntax error. Therefore, syntax refers to the form of the code and is contrasted with semantics, the meaning. In processing computer languages, semantic processing generally comes after syntactic processing. Let's try a Python sentence now. Now we want to write a hello world program in Python, which is generally a computer program that outputs or displays the message hello world. Such a program is very simple in most programming languages and is often used to illustrate the basic syntax of a programming language. As you can see, the sentence looks like this. Print, and then we've got hello world in the parentheses in the quotation marks. Notice that if we omit the parentheses, we get a syntax error. Obviously, such symbols and characters like parentheses, brackets, etc. are an inseparable part of most computer programming languages. Furthermore, such sensitivity shows how syntax-dependent programming languages are. Unlike natural languages, sentences need to be perfectly precise to run.
Programming languages. While these certainly meet the definition of a language, they also tend to have small vocabularies and follow highly structured conventions. Code will only compile and run if it's 100% free of spelling and syntactic errors. Of course, this is quite different from human languages, what are called natural languages, containing large diverse vocabularies, words with several different meanings, speakers with different accents, and all sorts of interesting wordplay. People also make linguistic faux pas when writing and speaking, like slurring words together, leaving out key details so things are ambiguous, and mispronouncing things. But for the most part, humans can roll right through these challenges. The skillful use of language is a major part of what makes us human.
Let's go into more details about differences between English and Python. Number 1. Programming languages are unambiguous, while natural languages are often ambiguous and require interpretation in context to be fully understood. Number 2. Natural languages consist of sentences, usually declarative sentences expressing information in a sequence. Programming languages typically are not declarative, but procedural, giving instructions to the machine to do something, like commands in natural languages. Number 3. Words don't have separable parts in programming languages. Like English, cat glosses to form a plural. No morphology, and that via brackets, line breaks, or other markers, embedding tends to be overtly and clearly marked on both sides for the parser in programming languages. Number 4. Most fundamentally, it is worth asking if programming languages even have meaning, or if they are just instructions. A computer doesn't know anything. It just does what the instructions tell it to do. Therefore, programming languages have no semantics or meaning. They just are instructions which translate into electronic signals, nothing more. Number 5. Programming languages tend to use more punctuations and symbols than natural languages. Unlike English, Python syntax is not really and extensively visualized in parsing trees, and books are not written on this concept. In the same vein, there is no head-to-head comparison between the syntax of the two. As you can see, the types of syntax structures in Python are categorized this way. Of course, these representations are all conclusive, and not all of them are the topic of our discussion, and they all cannot be explained in a single session. To illustrate an example, let's talk about Python line structure. A Python program comprises logical lines. Do you remember our first example? We previously used the syntax print hello world. To Python, the sentence means print on the screen the phrase hello world, but as far as syntax is concerned, this is the structure. Print, and then parentheses, quotation marks, you write something between them. Firstly, these commands are case sensitive and need to be perfectly written. It means if we use capital P in print, we would get an error. Secondly, we see extensive use of characters and symbols as we mentioned in Python language. Each of these symbols or characters help with the syntax and interpretation of the program. Python syntax is comprised of symbols, words that we define, or variables, and reserved keywords. Let's take a look at these symbols and their functions. You can also see some programming constructs or keywords we extensively use while writing a code or sentence in Python. As you can see, Python has 35 keywords or reserved words. They cannot be used as identifiers. Python speaks procedural, imperative, and commands. As you can see in the syntax, we mostly start our sentences with an imperative or a command. Of course, we have other types of statements, like if, that we will get into in a minute. Python syntax comprises of commands and instructions we give through logical sentences and words, along with symbols and the variables we define. For instance, we can define A and B as follows. A equals welcome to my presentation, and B equals by Ehsan Zulfahmi. Then print A and B. As you can see, Python flawlessly reads, understands, and performs the sentence. You can also see that we can use if statements in Python. Python if statements are used for decision-making operations. They contain a large body of code which runs only when the condition given in the if statement is true. If the condition is false, then the optional else statement runs, which contains some code for the else condition. Let's see how the syntax works. Firstly, we define two variables, A equals 33 and B equals 200. Obviously, 200 is greater than 33, so the if statement syntax for Python would be if B is greater than A, then print the statement B is greater than A. As you can see, the syntax we need to follow is an if condition which is written in a formal and rather mathematical symbolic language, and then it follows a print command that follows the statement we wrote, B is greater than A. And we want to print if the condition is true. As we have seen, although there are some similarities between the syntax of English and Python, for instance, the specific word and symbol order and punctuation they follow, there are many differences too. Of course, one would argue if such comparison is the right one in the first place. What is your idea?